She's new.
You're live.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to the council meeting of May 31st, 2021. You will have noted that our flags are at half-mast. They will remain so for the foreseeable future to honor the 215 First Nations children whose lives were taken at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School in British Columbia. I would also like to remind our council and citizens that May 30th to June 5th, 2021 is Access Awareness Week in Nova Scotia. This year's theme is where we were, where we are, and where we want to be. This year, one of our decisions this evening is with regards to the Kentville Accessibility Action Plan. It was created in response to the priorities outlined by the province of Nova Scotia in the Access by Design 2030 legislation. The Kentville Accessibility Plan charts the way forward as we work to create a more inclusive, accessible, welcoming community in Kentville that exists and operates from peace and friendship. This meeting is being held on Zoom in respect of COVID-19 protocols and is being live streamed on Facebook Live. There's no public attendance permitted. The most up-to-date meeting package is on the Town of Kentville website. The public may send questions directly to the recording secretary's email at jwest@kentville.ca. This meeting is called to order. Have all of the councillors received and reviewed their meeting packages? Does any member of council have information pertaining to a matter before this council which has not been publicly circulated? I will remind members of council that we are in decision-making mode. We should be mindful of our decision-making wheel, and we have committed to making balanced and respectful decisions and adhering to our code of conduct. We will be voting by poll. The chair will call your name and ask how say you. This method permits us to verbally record your vote. Are there any conflict of interest issues that we should be aware of before this meeting commences? CAO Trope, could you please take the roll call?
Mayor Snow, based on all the faces and the names I see on the screen, all of council is present and accountable this evening.
Thank you very much. CAO, we have been provided with a proposed agenda, and I already know that you have a few things to add. So get your pens ready because there's quite a bit of change to our agenda. CAO?
So Mayor Snow, we have an in-camera session this evening. 9A, we have land. There are multiple items we'll be discussing there this evening. We also have an item B, I would add, which is personnel. I would add an item C, which is intermunicipal service agreements, or IMSA is the acronym you'll hear. And item D, which is a land lease matter separate from the other land matters above. So those four items I would add to this evening's agenda.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any further additions or deletions to this agenda? So I have two. Item 7A under new business should read multi-purpose facility RFP committee recommendation. And item 7B under new business should read transparency.
So moved, Your Worship.
Thank you. And the seconder? Thank you. Councillor Huntley, all those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you. You have before you the minutes of the April 26, 2021 council meeting. If there are no changes, the minutes are approved as distributed. If there are changes, the recording secretary will annotate the minutes in red and the annotated minutes will be added to the electronic meeting files as approved. Is there any changes? No changes? All right, perfect. We're moving right along. So we're moving on to our business arising. The first matter is grants to organization policy. So we have a recommendation from CAC to the Town Council to approve the amendments to the G28 grants to organizations policy. However, after review at the CAC meeting, there has been an update to streamline the language at para 4.2. So it was just removal of the duplication. You have it there in your meeting package. And from this recommendation, we would have a motion that council approve the amendments to the G28 grants to organization policy. Councillor Huntley, thank you for the motion, and seconder. Councillor York, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve the amendments to the G28 grants to organization policy. Is there any discussion? Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Just looking at the policy here, I guess it might be 4.1, 4.2, I'm not sure, or 4.2.
Yep.
This doesn't read correctly if I read all of the bold print here. It doesn't read smoothly. And so I'm wondering if we could do a little wordsmithing there to make it read smoothly rather than accept it the way it is.
Okay, so the town of Kentville recognizes that at times there's a requirement for nonprofit and charitable organizations to require emergency funding to assist in the delivery of programs outside of the normal application period using the Appendix A funding application form. The application will be received by the Chief Administrative Officer and considered by council subject to para 4.8 criteria and availability of funds. So there's an issue?
Yeah, well, yeah, using was, wasn't standing out there, so I didn't see that. That was the problem, using the Appendix A funding formula.
Okay.
And the Chief Administrative Officer and council, subject to paragraph 4.8 criteria and availability of funds. Okay, that's acceptable.
Okay,
now.
so it's and considered. It's not just Chief Administrative Officer and council. It's so
And considered
the
by
CAO receives it and council considers it. That's acceptable?
Thank you, that's acceptable.
All right, moving right along then. So is there any further discussion on the matter? Are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to approve the amendments to the G28 grants to organization policy. Deputy Mayor, how say you?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Huntley?
Yes.
Councillor Maxwell?
Yes.
Councillor York?
Yes.
Councillor Zabian?
Yes.
And I say yes, the motion is carried. Moving on to our next item of business is the King's Regional Emergency Management Plan. So we have a recommendation from the CAC to Town Council to approve the draft change 1 to the King's Regional Emergency Management Plan dated March 2021. And that becomes a motion that council approve the draft 1 change to the King's Regional Emergency Management Plan dated March 2021. Someone could move that, please. Councillor York, thank you. The seconder. Councillor Zabian, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve the draft change 1 to the King's Regional Emergency Management Plan dated March 2021. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to approve the draft change 1 to the King's Regional Emergency Management Plan dated March 2021. Deputy Mayor, how say you?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Huntley?
Yes.
Councillor Maxwell?
Yes.
Councillor York?
Yes.
Councillor Zabian?
Yes.
And I say yes, that motion is carried. The next item on our agenda is the bylaw revision for alternate voting. So we have a recommendation from CAC to Town Council to approve first reading of the Chapter 104 alternate voting bylaw at the 31 May 2021 council meeting, and further that council gives second reading to this bylaw at the 28th of June 2021 meeting. And if that became a motion, that council approve the first reading of the Chapter 104 alternate voting bylaw, and further that council gives second reading to this bylaw at the June 28th 2021 council meeting. If someone could move that, please.
So moved.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Huntley, thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve first reading of the Chapter 104 alternate voting bylaw, and further that council give second reading to this bylaw at the 28th of June 2021 council meeting. Is there any discussion on this matter? No discussion? Are you prepared for the question? The question is on adoption of the motion to approve first reading of the Chapter 104 alternate voting bylaw, and further that council gives second reading to this bylaw at the 28th of June 2021 council meeting. Deputy Mayor, how say you?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Huntley?
Yes.
Councillor Maxwell?
Yes.
Councillor York?
Yes.
Councillor Zabian?
Yes.
And I say yes, and that motion is carried. Moving right along, we have a recommendation from CAC to council to approve the receipt and adoption of the Town of Kentville Accessibility Action Plan, and further that council support the implementation of the priority phasing recommendations, recognizing that full implementation will fall with the approved budgetary process proposed annually. So the motion is that council approve the receipt and adoption of the Town of Kentville Accessibility Action Plan, and further that council support the implementation of the priority phasing recommendations, recognizing that full implementation will fall within the approved budgetary process proposed annually. Someone can move that, please.
So moved.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell for the second.
Yes.
Thank you. It has been moved and seconded that council approve the receipt and adoption of the Town of Kentville Accessibility Action Plan, and further that council support the implementation of the priority phasing recommendations, recognizing that full implementation will fall with the approved budgetary process proposed annually. Is there any discussion on this matter? There being no discussion, are you ready for the question? The question is on adoption of the Town of Kent, receipt and adoption of the Town of Kentville Accessibility Action Plan, and further that council support the implementation of priority phasing recommendations, recognizing that full implementation will fall with the approved budgetary process annually. Deputy Mayor, how say you?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
No.
Councillor Huntley?
Yes.
Councillor Maxwell?
Yes.
Councillor York?
Yes.
Councillor Zabian?
No.
And I say yes, and this motion is carried. The Accessibility Advisory Committee will now move from preparation phase into the accessibility plan and move into implementation phase. So there are no recommendations this week arising from the CAC meeting on May 10th. And typically recommendations come from staff and they are read by a member of council. But this evening we had none. Most of our business was old business. So we'll move on to our councillor reports. Councillor Gerard. You're on mute.
There we go. Sorry. It was an easy month for me because the only thing I had besides the MPS amendment meeting was Valley Waste. So Valley Waste has ramped up public education on apartments, contractor education, because they went to only essentials and spring cleanups. Staff have begun to clean up the eastern and western site with having a little bit of extra time. And of course, everybody knows the good news that came from Valley Waste, where there's been some reconciling between Valley Waste and Annapolis County. And that is all my report. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Councillor Huntley.
Your worship,
Yes,
could I just ask Councillor Gerard a question about Valley Waste?
certainly.
Okay. I've heard from a number of people that visit Valley Waste to drop things off or what have you, that there seems to be maybe a shortage in staff. It just doesn't seem to be sort of the welcoming bustle of people that are usually there to sort of point them where to go. I'm just wondering if any staffing issues have been discussed.
So they have just hired, they're getting students in place. They got some funding for some students. Over the last year and a half, there's been a change. So they brought back a gentleman named Ken Redden, who was their operations manager, who's excellent. He has, on top of everything else, been trying to organize and clean up the site. So doing all that work with the staff that he had, on top of COVID, on top of spring cleanups and everything else. Plus there's some stuff going on up at the recycling plant that are everything's going to be good things that are happening. But yes, they've been trying to get everything done. Plus, with the re-welcoming of Annapolis, things in the Western Depot have been frantic. So, trying to keep up with all the maintenance, plus for years and years, money hasn't been put aside. Sorry, I shouldn't say money hasn't been put aside, but the maintenance hasn't been done the way it should be done. So they're cleaning stuff up, and I'm up there 3 or 4 times a week for my own work. So I've noticed that, yes, things have been in a bit of disarray.
Okay,
So yes,
great.
you're the people you know are correct.
Great. Thanks for the update.
All right. Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's been a busy month for me, for sure. Valley Wren, the Oversight Committee, I was in on the discussion with the new membership and also on the recruitment team there. King's Transit, we had Pat Meager. He reviewed the transit emergency plan, and we had discussed budgets and a plan for buses that were coming from Halifax. We talked about also into the mentoring strategy because a lot of the meetings got canceled for mentoring. So I had a lot of correspondence and Zoom with the coordinator on how they were going to move forward with COVID. And of course, it was really quiet. Accessibility, you know, the last one was reviewed the new plan rollout to council, when it was going to happen, who was going to be involved, if we were going to do a presentation, and that was a lunch Zoom. Nothing for diversity. The King's Transit Recruitment Committee, there was 4, even 5 meetings of that. So I participated in the recruitment process, the hiring of a new general manager, and we have now hired Pat Meager, which has come aboard, and he started this week. So yay, that's awesome. And after that one, the King's point-to-point transit, there was a discussion of the operating stats. They're also looking to hire a new manager at King's point-to-point because the lady who's there now will be leaving. So they have a recruitment team who is in the midst, and there was one who was supposed to come aboard, but mine got changed. So they're still in that process for sure. Going back to King's Transit, we had a presentation from the Valley Public Transit Riders Association. That was about 15 minutes, which was quite educational because even before COVID, they had started some sort of survey, and they would travel the buses and they would kind of see who was riding. They were looking at what times, and they weren't looking at the same time every day. So it was, got them a better picture. And then of course, COVID happened and the rest kind of had to be canceled. However, moving forward, when some normalcy comes, I think they will be good to go again. And the public participation meeting I joined in, and then the accessibility meeting we had the other day to talk a little bit more about the plan. And yeah, Town of Kentville, I did the COVID survey for the small business that was on the site. Went into the spring conference for a couple of days. talking about the relaunch of the asset management, which will also key in climate change this time. So I have signed up for that. There was a keynote speaker there, Bill Carr. And originally, when you think of Bill Carr, you think of a comedian, but he was quite insightful about people. And I actually learned quite a lot. And of course, he was funny along the way too. So that was kind of cool. Global Summits Solution. It was actually, obviously, it was held in Berlin, but obviously it was on screen. But wow, that was pretty cool. They talked about, it was a World Forum policy, but they talked about challenges. So for example, where does all our electronics go? Where do all our cell phones, and when they go to die, what do we do with them? And they showed us a place where, for example, in India, where there was a room and the people who were working there were actually working on the floor. And they had figured out a way to strip the cords, and they would tie it around their toe, and then they were so fast at it. So what another group was trying to do was thinking, okay, it's not just about electronics here, it's also about your health. And how do we get you a better working environment? So they wanted to put them in a room. There was tables, there was workstations for people. And when they got in the room, they were standing there because they didn't know what to do. And the first question was, where can we sit? Because that's what they knew. And it was also very productive for them, because now they would have to learn a new way to work on a table. So that was quite interesting. And it was kind of neat because I pulled in my name and I said I was from Kentville, Nova Scotia, Canada. And a little blurb came up to the side and it said, welcome, would you like to participate in our next session? I was like, yes, right? So it was kind of, took a picture of my name on their screen under global. So that was kind of cool. Anyway, just a lot of correspondence with residents over the month, from fidget blankets for Kings Point to Point to PACE program, noise bylaw inquiries. And there's a lot of seminars there that I took that I was trying to keep myself occupied, because I know, for example, yes, I'm on the climate partners, but there's still a lot that I don't know. So I've signed up for things, and no cost to the town. It's just I took it upon myself to learn. So, there's a course coming up and it's 4 weeks at Cornell University. So I'm hoping to learn a little bit about that and how I could possibly be a leader in that group. And the rest were, Q&As with government about business community groups, small business, their concerns through COVID, and removing barriers for disabilities during COVID times. There's a lot of sessions about involving COVID. And that's it.
Excellent, thank you. Paula, can you tell us how many buses we're getting from Halifax?
We have 4.
4?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
And doesn't everybody have a junk drawer with a whole bunch of cell phones in it in their kitchen?
No, no electronics in this house whatsoever.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Let's see, I have, I've attended all the council meetings. Accessibility Committee and the Student Bursary Committee have met. I did the public participation meeting on May 20th. During the Accessibility Committee meeting, we discussed how the presentation of the accessibility plan to the May CAC would unfold. We also tossed around ideas how a public celebration might unfold if the plan is accepted by council at the May meeting. The committee was informed that the plan is already impacting decisions being made at Town Hall each workday. For the Student Bursary Committee, unfortunately, we had only 4 applications for student bursaries from the town of Kentville this year. We did not have a candidate that fulfilled the requirements for the NOLA Folker Hill Bursary. And as a result, the committee decided not to award that bursary this year. Instead, the committee recommends that council award 4 $500 bursaries after graduation ceremonies take place at the high school. I will announce who our recipients are. I would like to thank retired teachers, Mrs. Wendy Hood and Mrs. Marina DeWolf, for their assistance on this committee once again this year. And that's my report.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell, do you know if they're going to have in-person graduations? Has anything been said yet?
I don't know for sure. I would seriously doubt that they'll be in person. They'll probably resemble what happened last year.
Okay, very,
graduation.
very good then. Thank you. All right. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. Same as everybody else, last council meeting attended April 26th, and last CAC was May 10th. On May the 20th, I attended Regional Sewer Committee, where we, as we do with at every meeting, we have an update from our operations and compliance teams. Right now we have about 6 on-demand heaters that are not working. It does take time due to COVID to get the parts and the maintenance done. This heats the water, obviously, so that it keeps the screen cleans before things go into our lagoon. So as a result of those being down, our BODs and TSSs are up slightly. We are looking also at doing more PSAs. I'm speaking acronyms, so I apologize. More public service announcements about what not to put down the toilet. We're finding since the inception of COVID that more and more is going down the toilets, wipes, masks, and other associated items that shouldn't be. So we're going to ramp up our PSAs on those. And then we also had an in-camera discussion where we talked about desludging. May 20th was Investment Advisory Committee, where we went over the review and recommendations with our investment advisor. The balance of the portfolio was just north of 14 million. And we have about 1.1 million coming due this June. And the wish of the committee under the new, the direction of the investment advisors that we commence a different direction with funds. And we are still waiting on approval from the minister for the proposed IPS investment policy statement changes. Pretty much the same report as I did the last time, but now the IPS report, as I understand from CAO Troke, is with the Department of Finance, and it appears that upon sign off, that the committee will sign off and that we will be able to make the recommended changes. May 12th, I attended the KBC board meeting. That was my first one. I am sitting on that in my position as deputy mayor, as ex officio. The minutes and agenda are available on request. I think they're on their site as well. But suffice to say, it was an excellent meeting, well run, a lot of great participation, and they're doing some really, really great works in the town of Kentville. May 20th was our MPS and LUB public participation meeting, where Director Gentleman presented the housekeeping items in order to clean up the MPS and the LUB. April the 22nd, I had a meeting with the KBC board chair just to review my role with the board as deputy mayor and sort of that I'm a liaison between council and the board. And April the 23rd, I attended the REN, Regional Enterprise Network Strategic Planning Session. And like Councillor Huntley, I attended May 6th and 7th, the Nsfm Spring Conference. And where Bill Carr was one of our speakers, as she alluded to, and he was very good. I took a lot from him. He is a comedian and always tries to instill humor and everything, but he always does such a fine job. So I took a lot from him, and various meetings that I've had with citizens over the phone or in person while physically distancing. And I believe that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Can I ask just a quick question?
Sure.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor, just wondering when, do you know when KBC asks for their grant or their funding?
When they, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Councillor.
when their ask is up, when they ask for their funding.
I believe, so their year end, KBC's year end is March 31st.
Right.
And it comes before us. I think they have to report to us quarterly.
Right.
So they would probably come with their ask. I would think it would be somewhere in January. I know the renewal that we just did as a council, it's done on a per annum basis now, as opposed to every 4 years, which was the case previously.
Thank you.
Thank you.
CEO, could you clarify with that? Are we not working on a new agreement or updating the current agreement because it does come due?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Snow. So as per the Deputy Mayor's comments, Where we are right now is we have a base budget that was approved as part of the budget process. There is also another section for a series of activities that would need to come back for a separate approval outside of that base. So that's kind of the composite budget. And then the intent is that KBC would be coming back later in the year with kind of that projection piece, looking at kind of a multi-year plan. And then that would come back to council for consideration. But this year, there is a base monies that was already approved by council, but there's another component that's tied specifically to certain activities that would come back for approval.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Moving on, Councillor York.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not going to speak to everything that's sort of been spoken to already, including the council meetings and CAC. My committee meeting this month, as Councillor Gerard alluded to, the Police Commission didn't meet this month, but I did have PTA. It was our final PTA meeting of the year. At the time of the meeting, we were still in a school shutdown. Since we've had that meeting, we are now going back to school, so things have changed slightly from that meeting, including the cafeteria now being back up and operational. They had shut down and were able to pay off all of their accounts and pay their employees through the duration of the shutdown. But now they're back up and running and things are running smoothly there again. So the students will be fed and fed well, which is exciting. They had their last fundraiser with the Meadowbrook Meat Market boxes. Those went out to the community, so that was all tidied up and well organized. It was over $1,000 that they were able to raise for the PTA in that event, so that was really good. And we are still discussing the year-end appreciation for the staff. So we're still trying to work out something that would be meaningful, but then also feasible to do under current COVID restrictions. Like Councillors Huntley and Deputy Mayor Savage and Mayor Snow, I attended the spring conference on May 6th and 7th. Really a lot of information there, a lot of people to meet and chat with, and the breakout rooms were really helpful for that as well, especially being a first-time councillor and first conference to attend. So it was really helpful to have that information and have that time to still connect. Over Zoom, I think it was a little bit different, obviously, but it was still a valuable experience and still helpful to have those connections made across the province. So I'm really looking forward to some of the relationships that I have made there and continue to make as we go forward. I've also had a couple of phone conversations with some citizens in the community with just questions about smell in the town, but Deputy Mayor Savage has addressed that. And some questions about whether or not parks are shut down this time around with the shutdown, but the Parks and Recs department was able to keep everything up and running, which was wonderful this go around this spring. Really helpful. So succinctly, that's my report. I don't want to kind of pile on to what's already been said.
Thank you very much. Councillor Xavier.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not going to read everything through. I attended the meetings as all of you did with you. I did have a lot of engagement with residents the last month, concerned with the crosswalks. I see that they are painting them now, so hopefully they're going to get around and get them all done. Another thing, there was residents looking to pay their tax bills and having a lot of difficulty reaching people in that department. So I don't know if it was from limited staff in the building or if people weren't answering messages. I'm not sure, but a couple of complaints about that. And the only other thing I'm going to say is that I was on TV quite a bit this month promoting small business and Tenful. So if you want an autograph when we're done, just shoot me a line and I'll sign you a mug or a t-shirt. So thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And on to my report. All kinds of stuff happening. I guess the big talk would be economic recovery. And, we really thought that we were in recovery mode. And I will say that that one of the things that I said with this lockdown, especially when it was extended by 2 weeks, was the fact that we would be looking at life support rather than recovery. So it's nice to see that that we've had a pivot in government from that perspective. The other thing that I've been involved in is the IMSA. So that's intermunicipal service agreements. So those are the things that or the agreements that cover things like Valley Waste, King's Transit, the Valley Wren, Remote, those sort of things. And so the mayors and CAOs have been working on how we move forward and modernize that procedure. And we've had several meetings on that. The other thing is, of course, planning. We've had presentations as a council. We had a presentation, and then there was a public participation meeting with regards to some housekeeping changes and some changes to the C2 zone in particular. So I will remind council that if there's anything that you want on the table, that planning will be back at CAC, and it's always a good opportunity to get your thoughts down on paper, so that you know they're there, they're handy, and you know, they're not lost in translation, or you forget one of the items. So I attended. I'm attending conferences on Zoom. Oh, wow, how much fun is that? But I have to say that I've attended some really great conferences recently, and one of them was the Green Municipal Fund for Community Building and Retrofitting. And why this one is so important is because when we had the webinar, they were actually talking about the program being more extensive than when you read the story. So for example, if you have a museum in your town that needed some, let's say, new windows or that sort of thing, that they could actually partner with the municipality. And then what it does is it increases the amount that the municipality can go looking for from a grant and from a loan perspective. So there's some really great information. They just sent the webinar link, the recorded link on Friday. So I will send it out to each of you. So if you know of any older buildings in town or in the area who are looking at ways to upgrade from a green municipal fund, and this has to be not-for-profits and municipal buildings. So, you know, your store or your home doesn't count. But it's a really great way to get those things done. The other thing was, of course, 6th and 7th of May, Nsfm Spring Conference. So most of you will recall that we saw Bill Carr several years ago at one of our conferences in Halifax, and he is very, very entertaining. And at that time, his whole presentation was centered around this shift for brains. And anyway, what he did is he updated that, and he was talking about bouncing. So, you know, when you hear people saying, well, I can't wait to go back to normal. So he said, we should never go back. We should bounce forward. So that was kind of, you know, his whole starting point for everything. And you know, as my colleagues have already expressed, he was very entertaining. And I have to say that, you know, when you see him on stage, it's very impersonal, but with Zoom, it almost felt like, you know, it was a nice cozy little group. Anyway, it was really good. And then day 2, we had I'm going to use the term, the red tape ladies present to us, which was absolutely incredible. So getting regulations right. And it was a presentation from the Nova Scotia Office of Regulatory Affairs and Service Effectiveness. Anyway, they did an excellent presentation. And if you're looking for that presentation, it was actually in our Nsfm Monday memo last week. And it's very good. It's worth your time to watch it, particularly if you know of anybody who's trying to start a business or, you know, trying to do something and they seem to be butting up against a lot of red tape. You'll recall the ice cream shop that we had down in Center Square a few summers ago. Well, when they set that up, they weren't considered a restaurant and they weren't considered retail. They were some hybrid, and they actually got these ladies involved. And I say ladies because it's women that work in the office, but they actually got them involved. And what they did is they created a guide for Town of Kentville on how to navigate through the red tape that it takes to do a food establishment. So anyway, lots of really great things there. The other nice one that I saw was something called Nova Scotia Innovation Tour, and that was actually the Brookfield Institute of Innovation with Entrepreneurship, Joshua Zachariah and Mark Hazelden. And what they presented was Brookfield Institute is out of an Ontario university, and what they have actually created is a way of determining how inclusive your community is. So, you know, if you consider the training that we've done with the human rights people, our accessibility plan, this just marries up really nicely. And they did this work for the province of Nova Scotia. So all of the paperwork and everything is available to us for free. Board recruitment, 2 new candidates, meeting with different people, and what else did I do that was really interesting? I got to do a presentation to the RCAF basic military training course at Aldershot. So the military is also suffering through COVID, particularly in recruiting, and they are down about 5,000 recruits and don't have the capacity to train them. So it's one of those long poles in the tent, and they're actually doing training for the Royal Canadian Air Force at an army base here in Kentville. So it's really quite exciting, and that is my report. So if I could have a motion to accept the councillor and mayor's reports as presented, please. Councillor Zabian, thank you. And Councillor Huntley for the second. It has been moved and seconded that councillor and mayor's reports be accepted as presented. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. When you were speaking about the green fund, the Green Municipal Fund, and some of the older buildings that could qualify for that, I don't know if any of the other councillors were contacted by the King's Historical Society to let us know that they have to do significant and substantial upgrades to the property there in Kentville. That might be something that would interest them, because I don't know that that had been announced yet when those discussions were happening.
Okay, I will forward that information over there to them, and they can look at it and then come back to us and say if they want to do anything. Because it's one of those things that, because of the municipal component, that it could be a way of getting our windows done in town hall, or you know, that sort of thing. And I think they're also including fire halls and you know, community centers. So if you think of the rec center that's right here beside town hall, that entire part of that building would be eligible for this funding.
Right. Okay.
So
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So we're moving on to new business. So our first order of new business is the multi-purpose facility feasibility RFP committee. So this committee is established to create a request for proposal, so an RFP, to contract a feasibility study to consider the relevant factors such as economic, technical, legal, scheduling considerations to determine the likelihood of successfully completing a multi-purpose facility in this area. This committee is composed of the CAO, a staff member, and 1 elected official of each of the Kings County municipalities. I reviewed the skill sets and suitability of members of council and provided a recommendation to the CAO for decision by council. The inclusion on the agenda of the meeting this evening. This study is required before proceeding to the multi-purpose facility planning committee. So the recommendation is that the multi-purpose facility feasibility study RFP committee is added to the committees of Kentville as an ad hoc committee. And further, that it is recommended that Councillor Jillian York sit on this committee as the elected representative for the Town of Kentville Council. So the motion is that council adopt the recommendation for the ad hoc committee and appointment as presented. If I could have someone move that, please.
So moved.
Thank you. And Councillor Huntley as the second. It has been moved and seconded that council adopt the recommendation for the ad hoc committee and appointment as presented. Discussion, Councillor Maxwell, I see your hand is up. You're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. I have some concerns about the process that we're going through here. And I know that we're a very process oriented group. And I feel that the process for bringing this RFD forward is a flawed process. There are all kinds of problems with it. And I think before we go any further, we need to have a discussion about the process. And I would like to make a motion. And
There's already a motion on the floor, Councillor Maxwell.
Okay, well, I will recommend that we defeat this motion. Well, actually make an amendment to this motion, maybe, that I would like to have a discussion on the process that was used to come up with this RFD outside of this council meeting. And so I would make an amendment that we have that discussion prior to a vote on whether or not we're going to accept this process.
So what's your amendment?
That we have a discussion.
That's not an amendment to the motion. That's a change of the motion. You can't do that.
All right, go through, I guess, you want to do it this way, go through, and I think that we have a very serious issue here. It's an issue in process. This RFD came
It's an RFP. It's an RFP.
Okay, your RFP came about at a meeting somewhere outside of this council. We were not involved in the making up of this RFP. We didn't know anything about it until this morning. And I think that this council, and I'm putting up a strong objection here, that this council needs to have an open and honest discussion about the way that this has unfolded. For example, I have an email in front of me that I sent to the CAO in April. It was never acknowledged. I asked to be considered for this position. I am extremely well qualified for this position, and I have been ignored. Basically ignored. And I would like to know by what authority my asking to be on this committee was ignored.
Councillor Maxwell, can I ask what committee you requested to be on? Because when you spoke to me, you asked me if you could be on the multi-purpose planning committee. And I said to you at the time that I would support that request.
No, I sent an email to the CAO on April the 12th, the day he brought it up at a CAC meeting. And I asked to be considered for the committee that he brought up at that meeting, which is the one we're talking about right now with the CAOs. So we have a problem here, because I am probably, and without being big-headed, the most qualified person on this table to talk about the development or the building of a multi-purpose recreation facility in this county.
Councillor Maxwell, you do realize that this request for proposal has nothing to do with building a building or the composition of that building. That comes with the multi-purpose planning committee. This is an RFP to get someone to do a feasibility study. There is no bricks and mortar involved in this. This is whether or not our area can support a multi-purpose facility. The reason that Councillor York was selected is her extensive knowledge and practical experience in the development of RFPs while she was employed by the Town of Kentville Recreation Department. So this is an RFP. This is not about the building. This is about a study to see whether or not we can afford to have this building here.
Regardless, the process has not been conducted properly.
I'm
Well, I
afraid that
shouldn't
you're
be-
incorrect there.
I shouldn't be coming here with this concern tonight. And I didn't hear about it until yesterday via email. And we don't get the RFP until this morning.
Okay, you're mixing terms here. The RFP is the request for proposal, which is part of the task of this ad hoc committee. Ad hoc committees are not committees of council, and typically they have been staffed by the mayor and CAO discussion with a request or a recommendation to council for approval. That is our standard practice that has been going on since before you or I were elected.
Yes, I will give you that, but it does not follow the policy. There is nothing in the policy that says the mayor and the deputy mayor or whoever makes up an RFP or sets a recommendation for a committee member. It is done by council, and that is in our policy. And
Not for ad hoc
what we should
committees, it's
follow.
not. Not for ad hoc committees, it's not.
Ad hoc
This is our
committees-
standard practice.
Ad hoc committees is mentioned in here, and it talks about council being involved in that. So that's why I'm asking to have a discussion on this prior to making a vote on a committee that's being set up outside of council, that a person has been approached, that a counselor has been approached and asked to be sitting on this committee outside of council, and then making that recommendation to council. Your worship, you have told us multiple times that we are not to make decisions by talking to each other outside of this council table. And that is exactly what has happened here. And that is outside the Municipal Government Act, and it is clearly outside our policy. Not to mention the fact that I had submitted a request that was completely ignored.
Well, I am unaware of your request for that. The only request that I have from you is from our discussion after our March 8th meeting, when I called you to talk about whether or not you wanted to be on our Green Municipal Fund committee. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And at that time, you expressed that there were two things that you wanted to be involved with.
You asked me if I was waiting for something with a little more action to it. And I
you
said,
said yes.
I said yes.
Exactly. And one of those things was the multi-purpose planning committee. This
Oh, I
is
don't-
not that.
I don't know about that, but I will ask CAO Troke why he didn't pass along my email to your worship.
Mayor Snow, if I may.
Sure, please.
So first of all, thank you, Councillor Maxwell. The email that you sent me on April 12th is that you were extremely interested in seeing this facility built. And you referenced the fact that you were involved in many other activities around gymnasiums and so on. And so in this case, this is the feasibility study. This is not about the physical building of the building. And so this is about working with likely a consultant with the idea of looking at economic analysis, looking at the feasibility of and costs associated with something like this, what it would mean what the spin-offs would be and so on. And so the email that I received from you is you're interested in seeing the facility built, and you're 100% right. You did email me about that, but it was very specific. And I'm just going off of recollection, so I'm please, if I paraphrase and get your email wrong, but I recall that you were extremely interested in seeing the facility happen. And so, and fully get that. In this case here, this is about a group who is simply looking at the feasibility of such a facility, and that report comes back to council. There would then be if a decision was that council and councils, because it would need support of all the different groups, that if it was going to move forward, you would then have an implementation, a building, and a planning committee that would go forward. And so two kind of separate pieces. So what I read in what you were asking for me at the time was you were very interested in the build side of this. If I've interpreted that wrong, I apologize, but I recall very specifically that you were wanting to see it built. So that's kind of where this as the feasibility piece is a different piece than actually the building of the building.
And thank you, and I appreciate your answer there. I did say, this was the night, I believe, CAC, when you first mentioned that you were going to need an elected representative on the committee. And I said, in my very first line, I just want to let you know I'm extremely interested in working on this facility committee if possible. This, meaning the one that you talked about that night. Now, I did go on and tell you a little bit about my background, and I did say that I was interested in getting the facility built, but at no time was I asked, are you interested in this feasibility committee, or are you interested in some kind of build? Never. As a matter of fact, I didn't get any acknowledgement of that email whatsoever. Not at all. And to me, that's a problem. And so yesterday, when the internet blew up with our emails, imagine how I felt at having 35 years of professional experience ignored, my professional, all those years of experience ignored. I'm not even worthy of an acknowledgement email. I'm not even worthy of a clarification email. And then we go back to making a committee tonight that has been drafted by 3 people.
Whoa, you cannot say that. It was drafted by me, the mayor.
There is an email floating out there that says otherwise.
That email is incorrect in the manner in which it has been expressed.
Well,
I made the recommendation as the mayor to the CAO.
All due respect.
No, there is no respect here. You have.
I'm going to call a point of order. I'll just call a point of order.
Okay, fine. I will drop
Your
that.
listener.
I just wanted to speak about process. I just want to be clear that ultimately the right process is being followed here. It's council who's going to put somebody on this committee. And if it hasn't come to council to create the committee, then that's happening here as well. It's not unusual for any committee, whether that's your list of standing committees or ad hoc committees, for there to be an ask or a recommendation to be made as to who's going to sit on those committees. And but if there's more than one person from council, when it's a councilor being appointed to a committee, if there's more than one person, the resolution to that, more than one person who expresses interest, and there's only one seat, the resolution to that is an election, folks. So if more than one person wants to be on this committee, then those names come forward, and council will simply vote on who the representative of council will be on the committee. And so I think that helps you bring it all to a head here, because I hear that there's a recommendation coming from the mayor as to who's going to fill this seat. Councillor Maxwell has clearly expressed her interest. So if there's 2 or more people interested in this, then then you have an election, and elections by default are open for everybody to see unless you decide that it's going to be by secret ballot, in which case the mayor will have to figure out how that's going to happen here tonight. So, but I just wanted to be clear about the process. There is process where this can, where this issue can be addressed.
Thank you, Solicitor. Councillor Zabian.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering, and I thank you for your comments, Solicitor Matar, but if there's no call for nomination or call for interest, and there's a meeting that wasn't an official meeting, it was done by email, and I have the email from Councillor York from yesterday. Thank you, Councillor York, for sending that. And I think she was very clear. She said that she was approached by the mayor and also by Deputy Mayor Savage, and that CAO Troke approved it. That's what the email says. I mean, we all read English. I don't know if Councillor York wants to speak, if there was a mistake there. If there's no call for interest from the mayor, how is that fair to throw that up there today? And furthermore, Your Worship, I'm just wondering, your document that you sent us at 1:30 today is dated the 26th. So how did that not get in the package until today? This does concern me. It really does, because you have a group of people here. We're representing the town, working together. How would you know if Councillor Maxwell was interested, Councillor Gerard was interested, Councillor Huntley was interested, Councillor York was interested? I don't think that's fair. It's not fair to the people. It's not fair to anybody in this room on Zoom right now. We're supposed to work together for Kentville. And I think this is a way to cause, it causes conflict, and we're proving it right now. Thank you.
Thank you. So that document was written on May 18th and sent to the CAO at that time. It since the lockdown, it obviously got missed and did not get uploaded. Him and I had a what's it called? FaceTime. We had a FaceTime on Friday, at which time I said that had to be added to the agenda as well. And it was erroneously added to the agenda as an appointment. It was never intended to be an appointment. Now, my decision-making process, because this was an ad hoc committee, because it needed one person for a task that is going to occur and then the committee ends, I wanted the person best suited for the task. The task is to write a request for proposal, an RFP to do a study. I had confirmation from Councillor Maxwell from a previous conversation of 2 committees that she wanted to be on, one of which was the building committee. This is not that. So that is why I did not consult with her, because she already expressed an interest in being on a future committee, and I was saving her for that. If I have done this erroneously, incorrectly, and the fuel on the fire coming from the emails this weekend did not help. But this is the process, and this is the process that has been going on this council forever and a day as far as committees go. The first time that we ever did volunteering for a committee was this September, and that was an error. And we saw that with the complaints that we got and the inequitable or unequitable, uneven distribution of work. So I will say that out and out. And I stand by my recommendation. And my recommendation was a discussion the CAO said to me from a meeting that he had with the CAOs, that there was a requirement for an elected official. I looked at the skill set and I chose the person that I thought was best suited for the task to get the task done. And that was brought to council for decision. I did not make a decision other than to recommend Councillor York because of her experience with requests for proposals.
I appreciate that, but according to the emails I have from CEO Troke on Saturday, it was supposed to be an announcement tonight. So it looked like to me, from the emails, if I can complete, it looks like it was a backdoor setup. Where and if you go to the emails, and they can all be FOI-popped if anybody would like to read them, it looks like it was a setup that it was going to be an announcement, and there was nothing in the package, which is disappointing. And then and I also want to say, I understand where you're saying that the emails maybe became overwhelming, or yesterday it's caused oil to fire. But had you responded to the first one, it looked like you were avoiding the question. To be honest with you, Mayor Snow, I'm going to be honest with you. I asked you twice. There was no response. I asked CEO Troke Saturday morning. He did reply. And then when I asked him who the counselor was, there was no more response from him at all Saturday. I have all the emails in front of me if you want me to read them publicly. And it was only yesterday morning, Jillian came forward, Councillor York, which I appreciate her honesty. She said, I am, and if you have a problem with it, go to CEO Troke. I was nominated by and approved. So as a counselor and anyone on this table, I hope you can appreciate where we feel or how it looks. And that's how it looks. Thank you.
And I certainly say that, and that is why I prefaced what I said, was that there was an error in the document that was sent to you and I on Friday, the agenda. So you and I were sent a separate copy of the agenda,
Yes.
you recall?
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you right now that I did not open that email on Friday because I was handwriting the changes that were being made to the agenda on the fly. And I'm also going to say that this has been our worst come together for package material. Because as I said, I wrote this document on the 18th of May, and I have all of those emails, and I have all of my files that you're free to look at if you wish. But this was intended to come to council as a recommendation, never as an appointment.
Well, in my opinion, and maybe this should be a discussion, that when these committees come up, there should be a call for nomination or a call for interest.
Not for ad hoc.
Well, I'm looking at 4.11 in the policy, and if we're not respecting the policy, I'm confused because, and maybe Solicitor Matar can chime in, I've heard that this is the usual practice for years, but there's a policy here. So do we not follow the policy, or do we follow the policy? That's what I'm confused about. So that's what I would like to know. And in general, do we follow the policies?
Yes, we do.
So the policy doesn't say that, though. It says
No,
ad hoc
because
here. Council may appoint ad hoc committees from time to time. So where does it say here that the mayor can make a recommendation and deputy mayor?
it doesn't say that, and that's the problem.
So
Is
we
that
should stress that.
it's the way that we have always done it. It's not been documented. This was one of the things that we were supposed to document the last time we amended this policy, and it never got done.
We should, because as somebody who maybe I might have been interested, maybe,
Folks.
Councilor Huntley might have been, it might have been nice to ask, and then there'd be no problem. There'd be a fair vote. Whoever got it, got it. It wouldn't look like you were biased or playing favorites, because I'm not saying you are, but that's how it would come across. That's
So
what it looks like.
So I'd just like to jump in here, Your Worship, if I can.
Certainly.
I totally understand all the comments about optics, but please keep optics separate from process, okay? They sometimes may overlap and sometimes are very different things. So I totally appreciate what people are saying about optics, but please don't think that when there are committee positions to be filled, that there's something legally wrong under your policy with an attempt being made to identify somebody who will fill the position well. So the optics may be that you should put it out to everybody. If you have two people who both express interest, what I'm hearing is a suggestion that a recommendation not come to council. That, in many situations, would be very strange for there not to be a recommendation. Usually recommendations are coming from staff, but there's nothing to say that the recommendation can't come from, if the recommendation is coming from a committee, it's coming from that committee. If the recommendation is coming from the mayor, it's coming from the mayor. A recommendation. So let's just say, for example, that you had two councillors interested in this and a recommendation's made, okay? I don't think you're in a position to criticize the fact the recommendation's been made. I understand the concern about the optics, that perhaps there were others who were interested who weren't identified. That's a different thing, okay? And certainly that message has been sent loud and clear. But at the end of the day, this council has to move past this issue. And so if more than one person is interested in this position, have an election and move on. But you're beating a dead horse, folks.
Thank you. Councillor Gerard.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't know whether this is the right process, but I'd like to call for a vote. If the solicitor is saying this is the way to move forward, let's get it done.
All right, before we do that, Councillor Zabian, the reason that I did not even consider you for this position is because you have been very vocal on Facebook and other mediums that you don't believe in studies. The whole purpose of this committee is to develop a request for proposal to do a study.
Excuse me?
Excuse me?
That's what you're going to talk to me right now about that? I'm in a public
No,
meeting?
no, that's, you said you were
No,
interested.
I am on very little committees, since people are watching at home. I am on very little committees, and you, as someone who's sitting there, you have no power, no more power than any of the rest of us here. You are the person, you're a spokesperson, I respect that. But for you to say that now and make those comments, there is clearly a bias here in this council. It started from day one. It's almost, I'm not sure, it's a group of people that are on one side, and it's unfortunate. And it's been since the beginning of this council. And like you said about 7 minutes ago, you even admitted it yourself that when we selected committees, the weight of them is inappropriate. So when you were sitting there the other day, why didn't you say, well, you know what, Jillian, Councillor York has a heavy load, Councillor Huntley has the heaviest load. Why don't we see if Councillor Zabian is interested in this committee, in one committee? The only committee that I was on, you dismantled it last month and you took it away from us. So I think there is a power struggle here, Your Worship. And I just, it's unfortunate to see this. I love this town. That's why I'm on this council. That's why I'm here for the people. I don't work for anybody on this screen right now. I work for the people outside. And I'm sorry to see this happen right now. It's unfortunate, but it is true. And I have to agree with everything that Councillor Maxwell has said tonight. You took this upon yourself. You contacted the deputy mayor. You went to Councillor York, and I'd like to ask her now if she would answer how you were nominated.
I am going to call a point of order again. I am not going to sit here unless we want to go in camera or something, Your Worship.
Well,
And
I
maybe
don't want to know how she
Solicitor
was
Matari, you can
contacted.
Councillor
support me on
Zabian,
that,
that's enough.
but I won't
I
continue.
want to know how she was contacted.
Councillor Zabian, enough.
It's
Okay,
not our question.
Councillor Zabian, enough.
I
Enough.
have-
We want the public wants to
Councillor
know.
Zabian, enough.
We want to know how she was contacted, Your Worship.
I have another.
No, you can't speak, Councillor Maxwell. You've already spoken. There's somebody with a hand up who has not spoken yet.
Okay. I didn't see Jillian's hand. Go ahead, Jillian.
I'll decide who speaks. Thank
Oh,
you.
sorry.
Councillor York.
So we spoke earlier about the emails that went around this weekend, and I'm obviously at the center of some of those emails. So I know, Councillor Maxwell, you've spoken publicly and you've spoken privately with me about the impacts of bullying in your life and around this council table. And in that email correspondence within our council, and then in comments you've made to members of the community at large, you've opted to express your disappointment in a committee process through personal attacks against me and bully tactics. You chose to falsely discredit my qualifications.
No,
You questioned my integrity
no, I did
and
not.
my abilities.
No,
And
I did
you
not.
alluded to
Councillor
the
Maxwell,
public
please.
sharing the discontent and disbelief of my election to this committee.
No,
So regardless of your concerns about the appointment process or the nomination process, it was unprofessional and it was unnecessary, and it was unacceptable for you to speak to me or about me in that manner, and I'm owed an apology.
I already came back to you and I explained that statement that you're upset about was not about you, that it was about the process. And I was very clear about that. And if you want to go back and read that, you may very well go back and read that. I also told you I felt very sorry that you were finding yourself in the middle of this mess and that you were put into this position. And if you want to go back and read that email, you will find that that is true. And I have never once attacked your qualifications or said anything about whether you were fit for the position or you weren't. I talked about myself and where I felt I was. Now, if you want to interpret that differently, that's up to you, but I would suggest you go back and read those emails.
And
Secondly,
Councillor Maxwell, I will suggest you do the same when you said that people will talk about me and my appointment in this community. And you might want to reference some of the conversations you've had with community members about my appointment. So you might want to also take a look at those emails as well. I do.
so you will
I'm
have to
gonna
tell
leave
me
it there.
which
No, I'm
community
done. Thank
members
you.
I
Councillor Maxwell,
talked to.
please.
You'll have to tell me which community members if I'm going to go back and talk to them. So
Certainly.
I can't take that because I haven't talked to hardly anybody about this. And but I will say this, that it says right here on the front page of the Committees of Council policy that the council may establish standing, special, ad hoc, and advisory committees. The council will establish those, not the mayor, not the deputy mayor, the council. And so I would suggest that if this policy is not going to be followed, that revisions be made in it. That's my first suggestion. And secondly, I think that we're all adults here, I think, although sometimes one might question, but we're all adults. And I think that we should be given the opportunity to express whether or not we are interested in something or not, and not to be ignored. And Councillor Zabian is sitting on our council with basically no committees. He was not elected by the people to sit and do nothing. And that is just entirely wrong. And furthermore, it was not specified to any of us that this was a feasibility committee until today. So that being said, right now at this point, I have been so insulted that I will not put my name forward for this. And I think this council should look at Councillor Zabian and Councillor York. One of them is the elected official with the voting power and the other is an alternate. And I think that Councillor Zabian should be given a committee by this council. And I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll call for the question. I know Councillor Gerard already has, but I will, if that's
CEO,
appropriate.
did you have your hand up? Sorry, Deputy Mayor. CEO, did I see you with your hand up?
No, and I think the deputy mayor is just about to head down the road with the recommendation that I was going to make.
Okay.
However, I would like to also make the comment that council was briefed with regards to the request that was made by the municipalities to put representatives on a feasibility study. This is a discussion that was made with council and approved by council to proceed with a feasibility study. So I just want to be clear that we're not, that this was something that was discussed and approved by council as step one of a multi-step process if decisions were going to be made. And that was laid out to council in the briefing and then the approval with this. So I just want to be clear, it is and was part of a briefing. And that this step is a step that was needed in order for the RFP around the feasibility to go forward. But I also believe that the deputy mayor was about to make a comment that would have been my recommendation.
Solicitor, from a process perspective, do we lay the motion on the table, do a vote, and then come back to the motion?
My suggestion would be to inquire whether others have interest in the position. If they don't, move forward. If they do, then take nominations for it and have an election.
Okay, thank you. Are there any nominations from the floor? Oh, Councillor Gerard.
I would nominate Councillor York.
Okay. Are there any other nominations from the floor?
And I nominate myself.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations from the floor? Are there any further nominations from the floor? Are there any further nominations from the floor? Are there any further nominations from the floor? There being no further nominations, we have two individuals who are looking to be on this multi-purpose feasibility study committee. RFP, writing an RFP for a feasibility study on the multi-purpose center. All those who would like to see Councillor York be our nominee, and I'm doing this alphabetically, be our elected official on this committee, please raise your hand. Is there any further reason to go forward? Councillor York, you will be our elected official person on this committee going forward with the recommendation. And the recommendation is still to have the ad hoc committee added to our list of committees. So the recommendation itself doesn't change. Councillor Maxwell.
I would like to make a motion to add an alternate. Councillor York is very busy with young children. She also has quite a number of committees and responsibilities. And I would like to see Councillor Zabian be able to be there as an alternate. So I'd like to make a motion to add him as an alternate.
How does Councillor Maxwell know how busy Councillor York is?
You know what,
Thanks.
I have four, you know what, Councillor?
Okay, just wait.
I have 4 kids and I
Will you
busy too, so that's not
Stop.
fair.
Enough.
Okay, well, I was asked the question.
Councillor Maxwell,
I was
the
asked. the
vote is
question.
done. Councillor York, you'll have to unmute yourself.
If you go up under the right-hand corner, under the ellipses, you can unmute yourself, Councillor York.
I can't because the host.
There you go.
There you go.
unmuted.
Thank you. The host wouldn't allow. That's what I was trying to type furiously. It is irrelevant, my schedule and my family makeup, and it is irresponsible to suggest that I cannot do this job because I am a mother and a working parent. That is unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. And I would like an apology, please.
Hear, hear.
Councillor Maxwell, a point of privilege has been called against you for your comments to Councillor York.
Councillor York, I will apologize. However, in this time of COVID, every parent is stressed,
Including
max.
Councillor Zabian's
Councillor-
children.
Councillor Maxwell, you are not.
So is Councillor Zabian, but he has no responsibilities on this council. He has none. He has no committees, not one.
That's not my problem.
No, I know, but I'm
Nor
saying.
is
I
it yours,
think that you should be
Councillor
there.
Maxwell.
Councillor Maxwell, enough already. You owe Councillor York an apology for the statement that you made that she was incapable of doing her job because she's a mother.
I didn't say that, so I will not apologize for that. I didn't say that. That's an interpretation, and it's incorrect.
That's right. It was because I had children specifically.
You didn't listen to the entire thing, and you have every.
Councillor Maxwell, please.
If part of it was because I had children, then that is problematic in and of itself. If any part of my inability to do a job is related to the fact that I have children, that is discrimination, and it doesn't make sense to then nominate somebody else who has children the same age as me. This is absurd, and it's a moot point.
It was part of a package. I'm sorry.
But it was part of the conversation. It should never have been part of the conversation. That's what we're saying to you, Councillor Maxwell. Is
Well,
that it
I'm
is
saying to
irrelevant,
you,
like
in
family
this
makeup.
time of COVID, there isn't a parent out there that's not stressed to the max.
How do you know this? How is Councillor Maxwell all knowing? I don't think this has anything to do with process. I think this has everything to do with someone got their feelings hurt because they think their ego and they're better and they would make much better choices. I apologize,
Gerard,
your worship.
It's just bias. I don't listen to him anymore.
Councillor Maxwell, enough. It is not bias.
It is bias.
Councillor
It's
Maxwell,
bias.
you
It
have
comes from last term and it's bias. I'm not putting up with it anymore. I sat quiet last term and I will not sit quiet
Councillor
this term.
Maxwell, enough. We do not need an alternate on this committee. So it's been moved and it's been moved. Where are we? Are you ready for the question?
Your worship,
Yes, solicitor.
sorry, I don't want to belabor the point, but Councillor Maxwell put a motion on the table. She may not get a seconder. It's not clear to me, however, before that's entertained, if the committee hasn't been established, let's get the committee established. And you know who Councillor York's been elected, but Councillor Maxwell did make a motion. Whether it gets a second or whether it gets a vote, I would suggest that that motion should be addressed. Sorry,
We
you're
still
on
have a
mute.
motion on the table that hasn't been completed. So she has to wait until this motion is completed because we don't have the committee. And the call for the committee was the CAO, one member of staff, and one elected official. So are you ready for the question? The question is that council adopt the recommendation for the ad hoc committee and appointment as presented. Deputy Mayor?
Yes.
Councillor Gerard?
Yes.
Councillor Huntley?
Yes.
Councillor Maxwell? You're mute.
I will abstain from this vote.
So that's a no?
I will abstain.
Okay, thank you. Councillor York?
Yes.
Councillor Zabian?
Yes.
And I say yes, the motion is carried. Councillor Maxwell,
Yes,
you had a motion?
I made the motion, yes.
Could you
That I
repeat it?
would like to see an alternate. I would like to see Councillor Zabian be given a committee. I would like to see him made.
What's your motion? That's not a motion, you're just rambling now.
I move that Councillor Zabian be made an alternate on this committee.
So Councillor Zabian appointed as the alternate.
That's fine.
Do we have a seconder? Is there a seconder?
Yes, I'll second myself since
There you go. It's been moved and seconded that council adopt the recommendation to appoint Councillor Zabian as the alternate to the multipurpose facility feasibility study RFP committee. Is there any discussion on this matter? Councillor Gerard?
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just like to point out, we just spent the last 15 minutes because you made a recommendation of someone on a committee. And I just would like to point out to Councillor Maxwell, she just did the exact same thing after sitting here listening to her for 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Zabian?
thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to make a comment right now that I think that most of you here voted against her motion before and her comments because you don't like her as a person, and that's unfortunate. And that's why you voted that's what it looks like. And if anybody wants to FOI pop those emails, go ahead.
Counselor Zabian,
Thank you.
you have now called in to question all of our character.
Well, I think it's you can watch
No,
it.
Counselor
and see it.
Zabian, you do not have the right to do that at a
You don't
council
have the
meeting.
right to question my character or my abilities on a committee saying that I don't like studies because you saw a post on Facebook in 2018 or 17 either. But I let you say it. So I'm
Counselor-
done. We're done. I congratulate Jillian York. I want to just make a comment as well. She is capable.
Counselor Zabian, we have a motion on the floor.
Yeah, I'm just making a comment. I want to congratulate her. I never questioned Jillian York.
Counselor
More
Zabian,
than
your
capable.
comment has to be material to
It is
the,
material. I know I'm rambling like you told Councillor Maxwell a minute ago, but I just want to
your
point out.
congratulations has nothing to do with the current
Well, I just
motion
want
that's on
people
the
at home to
floor.
know that I know that Councillor York is a great candidate. She'll do a great job. I have 4 kids. I'm as busy as she is. And it had nothing to do with Councillor York. It was the process. It was wrong. It was flawed. And I think everyone can see that. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on this matter?
Question?
The question, are you ready for the question? The question is to appoint Councillor Zabian as the alternate to the multi-purpose facility feasibility study RFP committee. Deputy Mayor, how say you?
No.
Councillor Gerard, how say you?
No.
Councillor Huntley?
No.
Councillor Maxwell?
Yes.
Councillor York?
No.
Councillor Zabian?
No, I guess I'll say no too.
Thank you. And I say no. The motion is defeated.
Your worship, what happens if there is a need for an alternate? What would happen? Because you said a little while ago that there wasn't a need. So we're killing the motion that there is a need for an alternate, or? Yeah.
CAO, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. Typically what happens in these situations, if representation can't be there for an ad hoc committee, the meetings normally will get rescheduled. So what happens is they generally do a poll when they can get all of the parties there and then select that as a date. And where we have Zoom, generally that will move their hours around in order to accommodate all of the committee members.
Gotcha, thank you.
All right, thank you. We've been asked for a break, a 5-minute break. It is 7:31, so we will take a pause for biological break. If you could just shut your cameras off. Jason, I guess keep going on with the recording. Please be cognizant, members of council, that you are still being recorded. Thank you. All right, we're all back. All right, and our next piece of business put on the agenda at the last minute by me was with regards to the emails over the weekend and the fact that transparency of this council was called out at the time. So over the weekend, there was an error on the agenda due to a lack of face-to-face agenda meeting last week. And I will say that as Councillor Zabian pointed out, that I did not immediately respond to the query, not realizing that there was an error. But I will also say that I needed some downtime, and that there are times when I dread responding to council over email for fear of the barrage of hatefulness. I have sent a document around for all of you to see. I can actually share it to my screen, I think. Perhaps not. Okay, never mind. It should be on the council package. It's called Decision-Making Guidelines. And it's one of the documents that Gordon McIntosh provided us with, and it talks about decision making and having adequate information available for decision makers and good debate. You did not have adequate information this weekend, and I apologize for not double checking that paperwork or to see that it was uploaded, as I did not have my package at the time either. So I was going by what was sitting on my desk, and it was a disaster at the time. I will also say that the nice thing with this package is that it has a really great decision-making flow chart, which I have attempted to use, and whether we use a request for decision or a recommendation to council, those are always the means of communicating to council in order to provide information so that we can have fulsome debate, and then we can proceed with our decision making. So in all cases, at no time did I make an arbitrary decision. What I made was a recommendation to council as information. And again, I apologize for not making sure that it was in the package on Wednesday. But having said that, what went on email was inconsistent with the respect that we do owe to each other. And it was also out of sequence with what our solicitor has told us with regards to meetings, and that all of our meetings are to be in public. And yes, sending an email to get information, amplifying information on something, or to get process details is well within the sort of thing that we should be doing. But when it starts to degrade into pushing information back and forth and providing opinions, then we have passed the information gathering stage, and we are then in the meeting stage. So I will request that as members of councils that you take time to read this decision-making guideline, and you commit to being mindful to the requirements for public debate of the issues, and not making it personal or making hurtful comments, because it does none of us any good. And if there's nothing further on that, I will move on to correspondence. We had no correspondence. Jennifer, do we have any public comments?
There are no public comments.
All right, thank you. So we will move to our in-camera. The council has several matters which must be conducted in closed session. We require a motion to go into the closed session to discuss the agenda items. We will not be returning to Facebook Live for completion of the meeting or adjournment. So if we could move into a closed session to discuss the agenda items, please.
So moved.
Thank you. Councillor York, I got you for the second. It has been moved and seconded that council move into a closed session. The question is on adoption of the motion to move into a closed session. All those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried and the time is 7:43. And Jason, Jennifer, thank you very much. Please shut off